If I could go to my first question here, it goes to the sunset. Deputy Secretary Blinken, a major concern here is the expiration date. In as little as 10 years, all of the restrictions and other measures that you're touting here today are going to come off, and Iran's nuclear program is going to be then treated as though it was the equivalent of the Netherlands. So why 10 years? Does the administration believe or hope that the Iranian regime will have moderated within that time frame?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, there's no agreement on the duration of various obligations. All of that is the subject of current negotiations. So whether some aspects are 10 years, more or less, that is all to be negotiated. I think looking at this as a sunset is not the accurate way to look at what we're trying to achieve. What we are proposing and seeking to achieve is a series of constraints and obligations. Some will end after a long period of time, others will continue longer than that, and still others will be indefinite, in perpetuity. The bottom line is that even after certain obligations are completed by Iran, it cannot become a nuclear weapon state. It will be legally bound under the Non-Proliferation Treaty not to make or acquire a nuclear weapon. There will be legally binding safeguards on material to verify and deter its diversion. It will have to sign and implement a comprehensive safeguards agreement and the additional protocol.
But that's why we're here today. You're putting this stock in Iran's signature to the NPT and its safeguards agreement, right? They've had those same commitments. They've been violating those commitments for years. That's why this process. I would just point that out. And the other point I would make is that 10 years or whatever that time frame is, they are then going to be treated as any other non-nuclear weapon NPT state. And that means no sanctions, no restrictions on procurement, no restrictions on the stockpile or the number of centrifuges it can spend at that point, 10 years out, or on the purity level to which it may enrich uranium. And I'll just give you an example of where this would put Iran. They would enrich uranium at that point to levels near weapon grade, I'm presuming, claiming the desire to power a nuclear navy, because that's what Brazil is doing. So I'm going to assume that they're going to do the same thing there. And that would all be permissible. It would all be blessed under this agreement, as I read it, no matter who's in charge of Iran in 10 years. And that's why Ranking Member Engel and I have a letter going to the President, signed by over 350 members of Congress, demanding that the verifiable constraints on Iran's program last decades, not as per is being discussed, a shorter period of time. So I just wanted to make that point. Let me go to my next question, and that goes to the one-year breakout. The administration has set a benchmark, a one-year breakout period, but is a year sufficient to detect and then reverse potential Iranian violations, and why not insist on a period of 2 or 3 years?
Mr. Chairman, we think that a one-year breakout time not only is sufficient, but indeed is quite conservative. We believe that with the verification and inspections and monitoring that we will insist on in any agreement, that would give us more than enough time not only to detect any abuse of the agreement, but also to act on it. If you look at what various experts have said, many have said that a far lesser period of time would be sufficient to detect and act on any violations. Let me also just, if I can, just add to this very quickly, Mr. Chairman. 1 year is very conservative. First of all, that's the most, if everything went perfectly for Iran, it would be 1 year. Second, the idea that any country, including Iran, would break out for one bomb's worth of material is highly unlikely.
Okay, but let me go to this question then. Will you insist that the IAEA inspectors have anywhere, anytime access to all facilities in Iran, including Revolutionary Guard bases, from what we know about what's gone on there? And will Iran have to satisfy all questions that the IAEA has regarding Iran's covert research on a nuclear warhead, including access to key scientific personnel and paperwork?
So, without going into the details, because all of this is still subject to negotiation, we will insist that the IAEA have the access it must have in order to do its job and to verify.
Yeah, I understand your perspective perspective of what's necessary to do their job, but mine is a specific list of criteria based upon my discussions with the IAEA, and I want to make certain that those are found and then are followed. And then lastly, it seems the administration plans to push the Security Council to adopt a new resolution to basically bless this agreement and relax sanctions. But at the same time, you're pushing off Congress. Why push for UN action, but not Congress?
Yeah. We're not pushing off either. I think, as you said and as Ranking Member Engel said, Congress will have to exercise its authority to lift sanctions at the end of an agreement if Iran complies. And indeed, keeping that until the end, until we see that Iran is complying, is the best way to sustain leverage.
Well, our concern here is if you push us off for 10 years, let us say, in theory, and if this is consequential enough to go to the UN Security Council at the outset under a resolution under Chapter 7, which by definition deals with a threat to peace, breaches of the peace, and acts of aggression, then it would certainly be consequential enough to be submitted to the Senate for advice and consent. That's the point I wanted to make.
So the Security Council, this is an international agreement. It's an agreement that would be made with the other members of the Security Council, with Iran. Under these circumstances, it would be normal for the Security Council to take note of any agreement and then to create a basis for lifting the UN-related sanctions.
But let me.
Congress will eventually have to decide whether to lift U.S. sanctions.
My time's expired, but suggesting that Congress has a role to play by voting on sanctions relief years from now, once a deal has run its course, that to me is disingenuous, but that's my view of it. We'll go to Mr. Engel for his questions. Thank you.